Mr. Fortenberry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, welcome. We appreciate your willingness to be here with us today. Gleaning some key findings from your testimony, I think you are saying that you want to create a 21st century architecture for diplomatic relations and foreign assistance. And secondly, that perhaps more money does not equate to better outcomes. And third is, and I think this is very important because there's a misperception in this regard, that there is going to be authentic engagement. And I think that is absolutely necessary in this complex time, that we lean into these difficulties. And I agree with you that more money does not necessarily mean better outcomes. However, we always have to wrestle with these tensions because it's been said here that we are looking for the proper synthesis of strong defense and smart diplomacy and sustainable development so that we can create the conditions in which other people have stability and we have security, and we can benefit from all of this exchange. I think that's the goal mutually shared here by everyone. So we want to aggressively wrestle with you as to where those right balances are. Three specific things I'd like to ask you about. With the commitment to eradicating ISIS and the horror that they have caused, particularly the genocide against Christians and Yazidis and other religious minorities, and the people they've killed the most, of course, are innocent Muslims. With the fall of Mosul quickly coming, I think it's important to quickly move toward what the administration has stated as a potential option, interim zones of stability, one of which could be the Nineveh Plain, which used to be a pluralistic area of Iraq where multiple ethnicity or multiple religious traditions live side by side. This has implications for migration as well, as 3+ million people in that area have been displaced. Where will they go? If, in coordination with the Iraqi central government and the Kurdistan central government, that we can create the security situation, integrating potential Christians, Yazidis, and others into military structures there so they can create the conditions for stability, maybe people can return home and recreate the pluralistic tradition in that ancient area. Because without that, the Middle East has no hope. We will lose the basis for any type of stabilization in society as a whole. Second, I want to ask you about the International Atomic Energy Agency and the commitment that you have to them. Look, we went through a very difficult debate about the Iran agreement. Part of that agreement, some of us voted against it, some of us voted for it, but part of that was obviously a more robust leveraging of the resources of the IAEA. I see that as the beginning of an evolving role for the IAEA nationally or internationally to move from just nuclear security to nuclear verifications. This has implications as well for North Korea if we can ever break that impasse. Finally, as well, I want to talk to you about Egypt. The administration is engaged, I think, in a very appropriate effort to replenish the relationship with Egypt. We forget that there is a peace accord that has held. There is a roadmap for peace in the Middle East. It's between Egypt and Israel. The current president of Egypt has made some very courageous statements about minority rights, protecting religious pluralism, as well as trying to show leadership on the international stage. Anything that I think we can do to affirm that relationship, and of course, then have the authentic friendship to be able to discuss hard things regarding human rights and the rest, I think is a very important priority to help restore Egypt's central role in creating conditions for stability in the Middle East.
Let me try to comment quickly on the de-ISIS campaign, and you mentioned Mosul. The State Department, working with USAID, the United Nations, and other aid agencies, has a model of approach as the military, and we work this very closely with Secretary Mattis, General Dunford, and our military forces on the ground. As they clear and liberate areas, our role is to come quickly behind with security, law enforcement, using local forces that are trusted by local people to recontact the previous governance of that area. Many of these people fled ahead of ISIS. They're in Turkey. They're in other places. Find them, bring them back so they are ready to resume governance, and then to quickly restore basic needs, power, water, hospitals, schools. After East Mosul was liberated some weeks ago, we already have achieved all of those. We have 40,000 children back in school in East Mosul today. It's to create the conditions so that people that fled this huge refugee problem we have. They want to come back.
Does that include minority populations, though?
It includes all. Now, I will tell you, encouraging minority populations to come back after the terrible atrocities that they suffered is challenging. And I think it's going to take time for them to see that the area really is stable. It really is under the control of people who will not harm them. So this is a confidence trust issue with a lot of the minority populations in particular, which we recognize. Prime Minister Abadi recognizes it. That part, it will be a slow process, but that is the objective. We have Sunni nations now in the Gulf are engaged directly with Sunni areas of Iraq. They previously would not engage. You may have seen the Foreign Minister of Saudi Arabia made a historic visit to Baghdad. The Prime Minister of Iraq is going to make a historic visit to Riyadh and to Bahrain. This is all of our effort to say to the GCC countries, you must help us secure the future of Iraq. Deal with your Sunni populations and support the restoration, the rehabilitation, humanitarian aid. We will work with Kurds and others on the Kurdish areas. We'll work with the Arab Shia within Iraq. They are all Iraqis. They're Iraqis first. So we're working Iraq very hard. On the IAEA and our international organizations budget, you see the reduction that's been taken there. We're working through how to actually allocate that across international organizations. We've not come to a final decision other than, I would tell you, right now our intention is to fully fund the IAEA for the reasons that you have described. And on Egypt, we have a lot of work to do with Egypt on improving the human rights situation. We were extremely disappointed by the recent legislation that President Sisi signed regarding NGO registration and preventing certain NGOs from operating. We're in discussions with them about how that is harmful to the way forward.
Mr. Fortenberry.
Secretary, quickly, can we return to one of the points I raised earlier with regards to interim zones of stability? You made the comment that as areas are being cleared, we're filling those in with an initial securitization effort and then allowing for governance structures to redevelop. I fear, though, that without a larger footprint in this regard, particularly in the Nineveh Plain area, we aren't going to create the long-term conditions for resecuritization as well as revitalization and repatriation of the ancient communities who once were housed in that area. So we've done considerable work thinking as well as putting down potential measurable outcomes in this regard. I'd love to be able to have the opportunity to get that to you because, again, I see this as inextricably intertwined with the future stability of the Middle East. It's not, of course, it's a clear issue of justice for the peoples who were so affected by genocide. But to restore a once flourishing pluralistic area restores the conditions for a true form of nationalism, which the Middle East is desperately in need of. If we lose that, there will be a tendency to default back to tribal ethnic allegiance, and we will never be in front of this problem. So is there a way to continue to dialogue with you in this regard?
Well, most certainly, I would welcome the discussion. In terms of the whole stabilization, we're looking at stabilization of Iraq broadly when the de-ISIS campaign ends. We've got a number of issues there in terms of Iranian militias, some foreign fighters that need to go home. We're working with Prime Minister Abadi on how he's going to deal with Shia militia or groups that have been engaged in the fight, and they've been important to the fight. Kurdish forces that are important to the fight, been engaged in the fight. When all this is over, how do we secure Iraq? And that is going to involve us and working with Secretary of Defense Mattis over what is the security arrangement the U.S. is willing to undertake with the government of Iraq. What do they want in the way of our help to secure and create that stability so that these regions, much of this, they need to get back to the original Constitution. A lot of elements of the original Constitution were never implemented, which gave the opportunity for regional autonomy. That led to a lot of this conflict.
That's a good point.
So, yes, we'd be very happy and willing to engage.